for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson. I'm your host today. Some good news coming out of the White House. President Biden has signed an executive order to pardon thousands of people convicted of simple marijuana possession under federal law. We'll get into the details of that. We have to talk about the welfare scandal in Mississippi. There's some interesting sidebars to this, so we'll get into that a little bit. We have to talk about the wars in the libraries, trying to keep books on the shelves. We also have a double Hammer Time segment and an off-the-cuff segment, so you're going to want to stick around for that today. A couple of reminders: you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us there as well. Got a programming note for the next couple of weeks. I am going to be gone, and I'll tell you why when I get back, because this is going to be some really interesting stuff for me. But next week, I am going to try and have put together a show totally dedicated to the topic of abortion. I'll have interviews with Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, with Michigan State Representative David LeGrand out of Grand Rapids. We have some organizers that I've talked to. It's going to be an interesting show. Plus, I'm going to have previous clips about discussions on abortion on this show. And then the following week, which would be released on the 21st. So that's the week of the 14th. So the week of the 21st, I'm going to go back into the archives and I'm going to assemble a collection of some of my favorite guests over the years. Guests like Caitlin Campbell, the then 18-year-old high school senior graduating from her class that fought back against her school that was pushing abstinence-only sex education in the school by having a abstinence-only speaker come to the school. When she started to complain, the principal of the school tried to get her college taken away from her, and she fought him on that too and won. And Caitlin's a great lady, and I need to replay this interview, and it's just amazing. Plus, I'm planning on throwing in a couple of other interviews, maybe Gretchen Whitmer when she was in the state senate. I'll figure it all out. Plus, I'm going to give a little insight into how the sausage is made on this show. So it'll be interesting, some little behind-the-scenes tidbits. So, again, that's going to be on the 14th and 21st of October. I plan to be back on the air with a brand new show, brand new topics on the 28th of October. So, and then at that time, I will also fill you in on what I've been up to those 2 weeks that I missed. So be sure to check that out. Real exciting stuff for the next couple of weeks here on Southpaws. Speaking of exciting stuff, let's get to our first story here. This is Laura Egan writing for NBC News. This is dated October 6th out of Washington. This came as a shock when I saw this. President Joe Biden on Thursday announced that he will take executive action to pardon thousands of people convicted of marijuana possession under federal law. In a statement, Biden said, quote, "Sending people to prison for possessing marijuana has upended too many lives and incarcerated people for conduct that many states no longer prohibit. Criminal records for marijuana possession have also imposed needless barriers to employment, housing, and educational opportunities. And while white and black and brown people use marijuana at similar rates, black and brown people have been arrested, prosecuted, and convicted at disproportionate rates." End of quote. And he's right there. The numbers don't lie, folks. A senior administration official said they estimate over 6,500 people with prior federal convictions for simple possession of marijuana will be pardoned. Biden said he would also encourage governors to take similar action with state offenses and would ask the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice to, quote, "initiate the administrative process to review expeditiously how marijuana is scheduled under federal law." End of quote. In the statement, Biden continues, quote, "Federal law currently classifies marijuana in Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, the classification meant for the most dangerous substances. This is the same schedule as for heroin and LSD, and even higher than the classification of fentanyl and methamphetamine, the drugs that are driving our overdose epidemic." End of quote. And you know what? He's right there, too. Why is marijuana, which has never killed anybody, got news for you, there have been 0 deaths from marijuana use. There's plenty of deaths from coke, heroin, LSD, fentanyl. Fentanyl's the big one now, methamphetamines. Yet marijuana is on the same level, according to the DEA, as heroin and LSD. Now, one of these days we may have to do an in-depth dive into the Controlled Substances Act. But in my opinion, reading over the Controlled Substances Act and the different schedules and classifications, marijuana needs to be a Schedule 3 drug. And it does, because it is used for medical purposes, and the potential for becoming addicted to marijuana is low to medium. There is no such thing as addiction to marijuana. I got news for you. Let me finish the story here. In a call with reporters, a senior administration official said that thousands of people with prior convictions for marijuana possession are denied housing, employment, or educational opportunities as a result. The official said, quote, "This pardon will help relieve those collateral consequences." End of quote. And you know what? That person's right. So good on President Biden for pardoning these people who were arrested and put in federal prison just for possessing a joint, for possessing maybe an ounce of marijuana. Not even an ounce. I mean, this is crazy stuff here. It isn't like they're being arrested for having bales full of marijuana. I mean, that's just, it's crazy that we continue to harass and prosecute people for smoking a joint. It really, and I'm not a big marijuana advocate, but I know a lot of people who smoke. They're not criminals. They're not out there stealing to continue their habit. That's not how it works, folks. The longer that I live, the more I think we should become more like Portugal. You know what they did there? They decriminalized everything and then spent the money that they were using on enforcement on treatment programs. And you know what? Addiction has gone down in Portugal. Not up, down, since they decriminalized everything. Because they're educating people. They're saying, look, this is what this does, this is what this drug does, this is what this drug does. And if you're addicted, we can help you. And I don't think they have to pay for it. I think it's free. Because guess what? Healthcare's free over there. Which is not here, folks. This whole country is ass backwards, and it has been for a long time. All right, I guess I need to step off the soapbox there when it comes to marijuana use. Let's go to our next story here. I want to get to this. This has to do with the welfare scandal that's been happening in Mississippi. Brett Favre, the former Green Bay quarterback, is involved in this, and we'll get to his part of it in just a little bit here. But there are other celebrities involved. some of them from the world of professional wrestling. And I've got this story. This is Anna Wolf writing for Mississippi Today. This is dated September 26th. A defendant in the Mississippi welfare scandal is alleging that he personally witnessed Republican Governor Phil Bryant instruct an appointee to cut welfare funding to a nonprofit because its director supported Democrat Jim Hood in the 2019 governor's race. The allegation that Bryant leveraged his control of welfare spending to punish a political opponent comes in a 2-year-old federal court filing released Friday after Mississippi Today successfully motioned to unseal the case. The account echoes a similar allegation Mississippi Today published just over a week ago that the same nonprofit was forced to fire Hood's wife in order to keep receiving welfare grant funding. And who's the defendant? Former WWE wrestler Ted DiBiase Jr., who had received millions of federal welfare dollars to conduct various anti-poverty services for 2 private nonprofits when suddenly the state allegedly pulled the program. Federal authorities who are attempting to seize DiBiase's home because of his alleged role in the welfare scheme say the Mississippi Department of Human Services abandoned the program and the wrestler failed to perform the work under his contracts. The federal complaint against DiBiase mirrors new federal charges that former welfare director John Davis pleaded guilty to on Thursday. DiBiase says that what actually happened is that in 2019, Governor Phil Bryant directed John Davis, the welfare director, to discontinue the agency's partnership with nonprofit Family Resource Center of North Mississippi because of its connection to Democrats in the state. Family Resource Center Director Christy Webb was an outspoken supporter of her friend and then Attorney General Jim Hood, a Democrat who was running against Republican then Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves for governor in 2019. That year, the term-limited Bryant, who still oversaw the welfare agency, also worked hard on the campaign trail to get Reeves elected to the governor's mansion. FRC was one of 2 nonprofits that funded the wrestler. DiBiase said his program, called the RISE program, was then moved out from under the private nonprofits to the state agency. In response to a federal complaint for forfeiture against him, DiBiase said this, quote, "Shortly before John Davis retired in mid-2019, he indicated that the RISE program would be taken in-house and overseen at MDHS as opposed to being overseen by FRC or MCEC. Upon information and belief, this occurred as a result of the governor directing John Davis to cease funding and working with FRC because FRC's executive director, Christy Webb, was openly supporting Jim Hood in the race for Mississippi governor." End of quote. The filing against the seizure continued. Quote, "The claimant who witnessed Bryant give that direction to Davis was subsequently informed by Davis that his contracts with FRC would be moved to MCEC. This did not affect claimant's performance under the contract." End of quote. Ted DiBiase Jr. made this claim in his response to a federal forfeiture complaint the U.S. Department of Justice filed against him in 2020, alleging he entered fraudulent contracts in order to obtain welfare funds. Mississippi Today motioned to unseal the case on August 18th. U.S. Magistrate Judge Keith Ball dismissed the U.S. Department of Justice's initial complaint against Ted DiBiase Jr. in 2021 after his lawyer successfully argued that the complaint failed to allege a crime and allowed the government to enter an amended complaint in August. Ted DiBiase Jr. argues that he completed the work the nonprofits paid him to conduct, therefore earning the money legally. DiBiase Jr.'s allegation against Bryant adds to claims that the former governor used his power to influence welfare spending, not just to benefit political allies, but to punish a Democratic opponent. Officials have not charged Bryant civilly or criminally, although they probably should at this point. A state prosecutor who secured a guilty plea from Davis last week said investigators have their sights set on higher-level officials as the welfare probe continues. Hinds County District Attorney Jody Owens said after Davis's guilty plea Thursday, quote, "We're still looking through records and text messages as we continue to move up. We also continue to work with the federal authorities in Washington and in Mississippi. John Davis is critical because the latter continues to move up," end of quote. Mississippi Today first reported a similar allegation from Webb that a local lawmaker had threatened her on Bryant's behalf to fire Hood's wife, Debbie Hood, in order to keep receiving funding from the state. Webb said she relayed the news to Debbie Hood, who agreed to resign. Hood's campaign manager, Michael Rajabian, said Debbie Hood confirmed the account. Webb also alleged that she eventually refused to continue paying the DiBiases, which angered Davis. Kathy Grace, Family Resource Center's original founder, was also running as a Democrat in 2019 for a local House seat against Republican Representative Shane Aguirre, Republican of Tupelo, who worked for FRC as an accountant in charge of reviewing invoices from its partners. Aguirre told Mississippi Today he did not work on or review the Dibiase projects. Ted DiBiase Jr. is the son of WWE legend Ted the Million Dollar Man DiBiase Sr. His younger brother, Brett DiBiase, also received welfare funds and pleaded guilty to his role in the fraud scheme in 2020. Through various contracts with the men, as well as Ted DiBiase Sr.'s Christian ministry, the DiBiase family received over $5 million in welfare funds. Also, I want to mention Brett DiBiase also once wrestled for the WWE, but he worked in their Farm Territory Florida Championship Wrestling. That promotion is now NXT. So why Mississippi and why the DiBiases? Well, Ted DiBiase was a huge wrestling star in Mississippi for promoter Cowboy Bill Watts in Mid-South Wrestling back in the 80s. The DiBiases were, and apparently still are, a big deal in Mississippi. So that's how they got involved in all this. So we'll see what happens with this case here. Well, let's get to Brett Favre's portion of this. I have this story from AJ Perez writing for Front Office Sports. This is dated October 3rd. A former White House lawyer now represents embattled NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre. Eric Herschmann, who advised one of Donald Trump's attorneys to, quote, "get a great fucking criminal defense lawyer," end of quote, in the aftermath of the January 6th insurrection, will handle Favre's defense, as first reported by Axios and confirmed by Front Office Sports on Monday. So there you go, folks. These people are just insane. As evidence mounts tying Favre to the Mississippi Welfare Fund scandal, so is the urgency to call upon a high-profile attorney. As Front Office Sports reported last week, Favre's longtime attorney Bud Holmes stepped aside as the former Green Bay Packers star is a defendant in a lawsuit filed by Mississippi's welfare agency and on the radar of investigators conducting a criminal probe. Favre supported Trump's bid for re-election in 2020. Well, there you go. Evil, violent, conservative traitor. Right there he is, folks. Herschmann was part of the defense team in Trump's first impeachment trial while he was still with the law firm Kasowitz Benson Torres. He left the firm where he worked 24 years and was a partner to become a senior advisor to Trump in August 2020. His testimony in front of the House Select Committee investigating the events surrounding January 6th included how he called efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election as nuts. Herschmann was reportedly subpoenaed by a federal grand jury looking into the insurrection. Favre's new lawyer told Axios he's convinced that his client did nothing wrong. Herschmann said, quote, "To be clear, Brett had no idea the welfare funds were being used or that others were involved in illegal conduct," end of quote. Oh, really? Yeah, that's what I think about that right there. Oh, my God. These people are just insane. Crooked. They're all crooks. You see them all doing this. All of them. You know, I was telling my mom this morning, it seems like idiots gravitate toward each other. Well, so do crooks. So do good people. People of a like conscience of a like mind seem to gravitate toward each other. And I guess that's why I surround myself with smart people, because I don't want to be involved in any of this stuff. Something that I guess a lot of people didn't want to be involved in occurred on Saturday night. I have this story. This is Thomas Kicka writing for Newsweek. This is dated October 2nd. Reports have emerged alleging that attendees were consistently leaving the venue over the course of Donald Trump's speech at a rally in Michigan on Saturday night. Yeah, Trump was in Warren to support multiple candidates, most notably gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon. I'll leave the commentary out for that, but you want to find out what I really think about her, go to my personal Facebook page. Dixon is challenging incumbent Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the gubernatorial race. And by the way, losing badly in the polls, and I mean very badly in the polls. Despite the occasion, several tweets from Detroit Free Press reporter Paul Egan seem to suggest that the event did not draw a capacity crowd and that Trump's speech at the rally may have driven some attendees away. In his initial tweet, Egan included a photo of an area at the back of the venue, despite it being only 10 minutes until Trump was due to speak. In the tweet, Egan said, quote, "This was the rear of the Macomb College Sports and Expo Center 10 minutes before Trump began speaking. There appeared to still be ample standing room. Fire marshal said capacity was 6,600, end of quote." Yeah. So check this out. You have 6,600 people. You don't fill the place, and people start leaving after you start talking about your family woes. Oh, they're coming after me. The feds, this a conspiracy. They're evil people. We'll get into that in a minute here. Later in the night, Egan said that at around 15 minutes into Trump's speech, attendees appeared to be steadily leaving. Trump reportedly spoke briefly about his endorsed candidates, including Attorney General candidate Matthew DePerno. DePerno under state investigation, by the way, for potentially tampering with voting machines, along with Berry County Sheriff Dar Leaf and a state legislator. We'll follow that story. We've talked about it in the past, and we're keeping an eye on it. And the other endorsed candidate, Secretary of State candidate Christina Caramo. Caramo's a nut job, straight up. She believes that the 2020 election was a fraud. She believes that Democrats are involved in pedophilia and child prostitution rings. She believes all of that bullshit. She really does. She's on video. They've been running ads in this state showing her talking about this whacked out stuff. It's unbelievable. His speech ultimately ended up lasting 1 hour. Egan tweeted, quote, "There's also been a steady stream of attendees heading for the exits since about the 15-minute mark of this now hour-long and ongoing speech. Trump said a few words about the candidates and launched into familiar grievances. Trump did eventually return to the Michigan candidates, inviting Dixon, DePerno, and Caramo back up to say a few words. Trump also again bashed Governor Whitmer over policing, environmental issues, and more," end of quote. A few hours later, Egan added another tweet to the thread, this time including a video he shot of attendees allegedly streaming out of the Macomb County venue not even halfway through Trump's speech. No, it's not allegedly. There's video of it. So we know where Newsweek stands. They lean to the right, folks. Evil, violent, conservative traitors there. Egan wrote, quote, "I didn't have the bandwidth to tweet it from the facility, but here's video of attendees streaming out of the complex in Warren, Michigan about 20 minutes into Trump's speech," end of quote. Newsweek reached out to Trump's office for comment. During the speech, Trump once again attacked the FBI for the recent search warrant its agents executed at his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida. The search turned up numerous folders of top-secret documents that Trump had claimed to have already returned to the National Archives. He also attacked the House Select Committee investigating last year's Capitol riot, calling the committee members, quote, sick people, end of quote. No, you need to look in the mirror, you orange pig, wannabe tin pot dictator. Trump also notably spoke out in support of Ginni Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who has been accused of attempting to help overturn the results of the 2020 election. He said, quote, "As we talk about and think of the rigged and stolen election of 2020, the presidential election rigged and stolen, I would like to thank a great woman named Ginni Thomas. Do you know Ginni Thomas? Great woman." End of quote. Oh my gosh, that just makes me want to hurl. It does. Oh man. Trump added, quote, "She says that she still believes the 2020 election was stolen. She didn't say, well, I'd like not to get involved. Of course, it was a wonderful election. She didn't wilt under pressure like so many others that are weak people and stupid people, because once they wilt, they end up being a witness for a long time." End of quote. Jeez. What kind of word salad is that? Oh, my God. She didn't wilt under the pressure. Yeah, really. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about Ginni Thomas here in just a few minutes, but let's go ahead to our next segment.
Stop! Hammer time!
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week, and we've got 2 winners for you this week. So anytime that we have 2 winners, Wade Garrett's got to chime in.
The double douche.
Who is that guy?
Gentlemen, Wade Garrett.
Holy sh**.
Exactly right.
So let's get to winner number 1, talking about the Trump rally. Winner number 1, Macomb County Commissioner Michelle Nard. Why am I singling her out? Because according to the records, she's a Democrat. She is a sitting Democrat attending a Trump rally. Why? Jonathan Osting at Bridge, Michigan, tweeted out a photo of her on Saturday when Trump was in Warren with this description. Michelle Nard, a Macomb County Commissioner elected as a Democrat, is here for the Trump rally in a Tudor Dixon hat. Dixon, who she is supporting over Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, will, quote, help the people, end of quote, and wants to maintain, quote, American values, end of quote. Those are direct quotes from Nard to Jonathan Osting. Yeah, you want to know what Michelle Nard's problem is? She has a Christianity problem. She is a fundamental, violent, conservative Christian traitor. Period. End of story. It's unreal. This is why I yell and I scream at the top of my lungs, telling my friends that the Democratic Party needs to purge these goddamn centrists, these pro-life motherfuckers. Purge them. Get them out of the party. They want to vote savage, they can become Republicans. Well, you're going to alienate a bunch of black people. Where are they going to go? They need to get on board with pro-choice or get out. One or the other. Sorry, not sorry. It is time. Like I said, it is beyond time to kick these violent conservatives out of the Democratic Party. You centrists, you need to go. You don't support a woman's right to choose, you need to go. If you support any of those two, you need to go. Oh, the Democratic Party, they need to be a Big Ten party. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten. No, they don't. The Big Tent needs to collapse on them. Take a few out. Really, it does. I keep telling you, this is what's killing the Democratic Party. Nobody wants to believe me. And it's like, well, I get what you're saying, but no, there's no goddamn buts to it. Get them out now. They're infesting the party that I used to support. I'm an independent now because the Democrats Bernie in Arizona in 2016. And I'm sick of it. I am really sick and tired of it. Oh, but no. The party needs to become more progressive. Follow the rest of this country. As the country goes progressive, the party needs to follow. You need to follow the people. You do. You really do. Oh, I got to move on or I'll really lose it. So winner number 1, Michelle Nard. Yeah, you're a nerd, all right. You're more like a nerd. So that's winner number 1, Michelle Nard. Winner number 2, Kentucky U.S. Senator Rand Paul. I've got this story. This is Bruce Schreiner writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 4th out of Louisville, Kentucky. Republican U.S. Senator Rand Paul was the victim of a violent attack in 2017 when his neighbor slammed into him from behind outside his Kentucky home. Yeah, we've talked about that on this show. The neighbor needs to be given a medal for what he did. Now, by the way, it was over a land dispute. It wasn't over anything political. Earlier that year, Paul took cover when a gunman opened fire while GOP members of Congress practiced for a charity baseball game. Yeah, and my comments have been made on that years ago. Go back into our archives about it. But Rand Paul revived those traumatic events in his bid for re-election this year with an incendiary social media video attacking his Democratic challenger Charles Booker. The video, released Monday shortly before a Senate campaign forum he declined to take part in because he'd get his ass kicked in the forum, says outright that Booker, quote, doesn't believe in civil discourse, only violence, end of quote. Yeah, really. It accuses the black former state lawmaker of associating with members of the quote-unquote radical left who condone and perpetrate violence. Yeah, they've pulled that shit up here in Michigan, too. And you know what? I'm sick of it. I really am. It is. It's bullshit. It's out-and-out lies. Republicans lie every time their mouth opens. Every time they put out a video, every time they put out a tweet, every time they put out a statement, it is a lie. It really is, folks. Booker denounced the ad, saying that it includes, quote, dangerous and dishonest rhetoric, end of quote. Booker continued, quote, his ad grossly lies about me and in a very sinister way attacks several Kentucky citizens by name. Neither I nor my campaign have ever endorsed violence against any political candidate. It is despicable for Rand Paul to even insinuate that. As an elected official in Canada, my family and I have received death threats. This is not something I take lightly because I understand the issue intimately. End of quote. The video was the latest eyebrow-raising tactic in a campaign featuring unconventional politicians. Booker appeared with a noose around his neck in an online ad soon after the spring primary to draw attention to Paul's stance on anti-lynching legislation. So, hey, you know what? That's good imagery right there. You need to throw it in these violent traitors' faces. You really do. Call them out on it. You need to get in their face and be just as disgusting as they are. You fight fire with fire. That's how you do it. You don't take the high road. Sometimes you got to get in the mud and wrestle the pigs. You really do, folks. Paul's video doesn't mention unrest from the far right or the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Of course not. Those were peaceful people. They were just visitors, really. In the wake of the FBI's search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, law enforcement officials across the country warned about an increase in threats and the potential for violent attacks on federal agents or buildings. The video was released as a preemptive attack against Booker shortly before the Democratic challenger appeared at a campaign forum aired on statewide television. Paul, who is seeking a third term in November, was invited but did not participate in the program, once again because they'll get their ass kicked. John Gibbs did the same thing here in Michigan against Hillary Scholten. He knew he was going to get his ass kicked on statewide television, and he declined to show up after saying he would, then backed out. That's the truth, folks. Right there is the truth. Paul's campaign scoured through social media to make his video claims that Booker's campaign has, quote, embraced people who celebrate and glorify, end of quote, violence against Paul. It says a Booker volunteer tweeted a graphic doctored image of Paul with a broken neck. And it claims the woman featured supporting Booker in a social media video has referred to Paul's attacker as her hero. Well, you know what? He is a hero. Put a medal on him. Just a reminder about that 2017 attack. Paul suffered broken ribs and later underwent lung surgery for injuries he says he sustained in the attack. The assailant was given a prison sentence. Paul was awarded more than $580,000 in damages and medical expenses in his lawsuit against the man. No, the man needs a medal for what he did. Booker said Tuesday that to associate him with Paul's violent altercation with his neighbor from 5 years ago is, quote, desperate, ridiculous, wholly offensive, and unacceptable, end of quote. Booker added, quote, Rand Paul has used racially charged dog whistles throughout his campaign to paint a violent picture of me instead of having the backbone to face me and the people of Kentucky on the merits of our vision for this Commonwealth, end of quote. The video also references 2019 remarks by a Black Lives Matter leader in Louisville that appeared to condone violence against Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Paul said Monday, quote, civil debate is an admired quality in a republic, but justifying, mocking, or celebrating violence as documented in this video of Booker and his allies should be rejected, end of quote. You know what? You sons of bitches gave up on civil debate 40 years ago when Rush Limbaugh hit the airwaves calling women feminazis, using the word libtards. Sorry, you lost that right there. You lost civil debate 40 years ago. We're just now catching up to your level, and you don't like it. That's all that it is that the Democrats are starting to get as good as the Republicans on playing their game. Now they're crying and playing the victim. Don't buy it, folks. Don't buy it. During his Monday night appearance on Kentucky Educational Television, Booker accused Paul of blowing the dog whistle on public safety and policing issues. Paul's campaign and his allies have tried to connect Booker with the defund the police movement. Yeah, they've done that up here too in Michigan. Booker says, quote, Rand Paul wants people to look at the color of my skin instead of my record, end of quote. Well, and that's also true as well. It is, folks. Paul has frequently visited mostly black neighborhoods during his Senate tenure, touting criminal justice reforms, anti-violence efforts, and education initiatives. Yeah, because he's trying to pander to black people who believe his bullshit. And for that matter, pandering to the red meat base of the Republican Party. And that's really how it gets to, as Jack would say, the red meat base. They do. They love this stuff. When pressed during the KET program on whether he supports eliminating law enforcement budgets, Booker replied, quote, it doesn't make any sense to get rid of budgets for law enforcement or any government agency, end of quote. He said that supporting structural change doesn't equate to backing, quote, any sort of abolishment. When there's a crisis, when someone's in an emergency, we all want to call 911 and have someone in law enforcement come to our aid. What we don't need is that same agency we call to protect and serve us kick in our door and shoot us in the dead of night, end of quote. Booker, of course, is referring to Breonna Taylor, the black paramedic shot in her Louisville apartment when police officers burst in during a narcotics investigation where they found no drugs because she was a paramedic. Booker marched in the streets in protest in 2020, as a lot of people did all across this country, especially here in Grand Rapids, Breonna Taylor's hometown. Booker ran for the Senate that year, but narrowly lost in the Democratic primary. Yeah, and they pushed a centrist against Mitch McConnell, and guess what happened? McConnell won. I'm telling you, folks, you got to get more progressive. You really do. It makes me mad. It makes me so mad. So to Michelle Nard and Rand Paul, we've got this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Oh, yeah, you got that right. Hey, Michelle, if you want to be violent, why don't you join the Republican Party? They would love you over there. Actually, they wouldn't love you there because of the color of your skin, but you haven't figured that out yet. I'm telling you, people are stupid. A lot of people are just plain stupid. They believe everything they're told. Folks, you need to do your own research. Hell, don't even believe what I tell you. Do your own research on stuff. Here's the difference. The difference is the stuff that I tell you is based in fact. I look up factual stuff when I give my opinions. When the Republicans, all they do is just spew their bullshit all the time. It really is disgusting. All right, let's get back to Ginni Thomas, because Trump mentioned her when he was in Warren. I have this story. This is Bart Jansen writing for USA Today. This is dated September 29th out of Washington. Ginni Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, repeated claims the 2020 election was stolen despite a lack of evidence while testifying Thursday before the House committee investigating the Capitol attack on January 6th. The committee wanted to interview Ginni Thomas about her advocacy for challenging the results of the election. Chairman Benny Thomas told reporters after the session that she repeated her opinion the election was stolen. Thompson told CNN, quote, "She said that," end of quote. Her lawyer, Mark Paoletta, issued a statement saying she answered the committee's questions, voiced her concerns about election fraud, and condemned the violence of January 6th. Paoletta said, quote, "As she has said from the outset, Mrs. Thomas has significant concerns about fraud and irregularities in the 2020 election. Beyond that, she played no role in any events after the 2020 election results." End of quote. Really? No, I don't believe her, and I don't believe her lawyer. Numerous public officials at federal and state levels investigated election results and found no widespread fraud, including Trump aides such as former Attorney General Bill Barr. And by the way, when they did find fraud, it was perpetrated by Republicans. That's period, end of story. Richard Donahue, former acting deputy attorney general, said Trump provided an arsenal of allegations about election fraud that were all shot down, including a baseless claim about Italian satellites altering votes. What? I haven't heard this one before. Donahue told the House committee, quote, "The whole thing was very, very murky at best, and the video was absurd," end of quote. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that is absolutely hilarious. Oh, the Italian satellites altered the vote.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
Oh my God, too much. The committee has been eager to talk with Ginni Thomas because she sent dozens of text messages to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows urging him to fight the results of the 2020 election. Among the 29 messages, Ginni Thomas called Biden's win, quote, "the greatest heist of our history," end of quote. That was a text that she sent on November 10th. That's according to an article published by the Washington Post. Thomas wrote on November 6th, quote, "do not concede. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back," end of quote. So right there, she's advocating for violence, folks. Right there it is. There's the dog whistle. What do you really need a map to see any of this?
I can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it.
Well, there you go. In addition, Ginni Thomas urged Arizona state lawmakers to reverse Donald Trump's election loss in 2020 by choosing electors themselves. The Washington Post reported she also pressured Wisconsin lawmakers to do the same. Well, in Michigan, there was an quote-unquote alternate slate of electors. At one time, one of them was Terry Lynn Land, who is now on the Wayne State University Board of Governors and needs to be kicked off for her participation in this. She was not one of the final signers. She dropped out because she must have saw the handwriting on the wall that she was going to get investigated and possibly go to prison for it. Her political activism, talking about Ginni Thomas, has raised concerns in the past about possible influence on Clarence Thomas and prompted calls for him to recuse himself from cases dealing with the Capitol attack. But Ginni Thomas said she doesn't discuss cases with her husband, and he hasn't commented on possible conflicts. Really? You know they talk to each other about this stuff. You really do, folks. Ginni Thomas acknowledged attending Trump's rally January 6th before a mob of his supporters attacked the Capitol, but she said she left the rally because it was cold and she never went to the Capitol. Yeah, that's her story. I don't believe any of it. I really don't. It's just crazy. And speaking of the courts and the Supreme Court, I want to get to this story. This is the Associated Press dated October 4th, writing out of Washington, folks. This is not The Onion. Well, actually, it is. The Onion has some serious things to say in defense of parody. The satirical site that manages to persuade people to believe the absurd has filed a Supreme Court brief in support of a man who was arrested and prosecuted for making fun of police on social media. Yes, folks, somebody got arrested and prosecuted for making fun of the police in Ohio. We'll tell you about that in a second here. Lawyers for The Onion wrote in a brief filed Monday, quote, "As the Globe's premier parodists, The Onion's writers also have a self-serving interest in preventing political authorities from imprisoning humorists. This brief is submitted in the interest of at least mitigating their future punishment," end of quote. The court filing doesn't entirely keep a straight face, calling the federal judiciary, quote, "total Latin dorks," end of quote. Damn right. The Onion said it employs 350,000 people, is read by 4.3 trillion people, and, quote, "has grown into the single most powerful and influential organization in human history," end of quote. I love them. The Supreme Court case involves Anthony Novak, who was arrested after he spoofed the Parma, Ohio police force in Facebook posts. The posts were published over 12 hours and included an announcement of new police hiring, quote, "strongly encouraging minorities to not apply," end of quote. Another post promoted a fake event in which child sex offenders could be, quote, "removed from the sex offender registry and accepted as an honorary police officer," end of quotes. He must have a real bad axe to grind with the Parma, Ohio cops. After being acquitted of criminal charges, the man sued the police for violating his constitutional rights, but a federal appeals court ruled the officers have, quote, "qualified immunity," and threw out the lawsuit, end of quote. No, they violated the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law abridging the right to freedom of speech or of the press. It says so, black and white. It's the First Amendment. It's first for a reason, because the founders of this country knew that speech was important, and that included political cartoons against him. It included satire. It included parody. It really did, folks. Unbelievable. And because the cops are part of the government, they indeed violated his First Amendment rights. Period. End of story. One issue is whether people might reasonably have believed that what they saw on Novak's site was real. The Onion said, quote, "put simply, for parody to work, it has to plausibly mimic the original," end of quote. They noted its own tendency to mimic, quote, "the dry tone of an Associated Press news story," end of quote. They said that because they knew the AP was going to report on this. This is great. More than once, people have republished The Onion's claims as true, including when it reported in 2012 that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was the sexiest man alive. The brief concludes with a familiar call for the court to hear the case and a twist. Lawyers for The Onion wrote, quote, "the petition for certiorari should be granted, the rights of the people vindicated, and various historical wrongs remedied. The Onion would welcome any one of the three, particularly the first," end of quote. I love that The Onion is coming out in support of this guy. Where's the ACLU? Because they need to be supporting him as well. All right, I want to get to this story. This is Michael Krantz writing for MLive, dated October 4th. And this is talking about censorship at the libraries, especially the Patmos Library in Jamestown Township, just outside of Grand Rapids. It's a slow Monday afternoon at Patmos Library in Jamestown Township, one of Michigan's fastest-growing communities with a population of about 8,900 residents, when Caitlin McLaughlin sits down to read stories to a group of 5 kids. The children count a school of fish on the page, waddle like penguins, tweet like birds, stand one-legged like flamingos, all in prompt to the books McLaughlin is reading to them. In sharp contrast to the youth story time scene, an ongoing debate over certain books that some want yanked from the shelves is putting libraries in Michigan and the rest of the country in the middle of a cultural controversy. No, there is no controversy. The First Amendment rules. Leave the books alone. Just do it. The controversy comes from evil, violent, conservative traitors that don't want you to read. They don't want you to get educated. They want you to be as dumb as they are. Free dumb. Free to be dumb. Public libraries have become the latest political background where the constitutional freedoms to read books with a vast array of themes and passages, even those some people disagree with, are being met with parental concern about keeping certain topics away from children. So far in 2022, Michigan Library Association Executive Director Deborah Mikula said her association has seen book challenges pop up in West Michigan, Southeast Michigan, the Saginaw Bay region, and the Upper Peninsula, and in greater numbers than years prior. Mikula said, quote, "There have been censorship issues forever. We're not surprised. It's not something new. It's just the volume of these attempted efforts and the extremist rhetoric that's going with them is unprecedented to us. We have never seen this many books challenged, and I think that that's something that we really have to look at." End of quote. Those challenging the content are objecting to a range of themes, overtly sexual passages, LGBTQ relationships, or racial justice, in wanting certain library books removed. The push to take these books off the shelves are sometimes coming with, quote, extremist rhetoric, end of quote, not seen before, such as labeling library workers as, quote, groomers and pedophiles, end of quote. Local and state library leaders are branding the push as acts of censorship. And while officials say the censorship efforts are happening across Michigan and the rest of the United States, the controversy is playing out intensely in West Michigan, home to two mostly conservative counties with a large religious base in multiple ways. Yeah, you got to remember, Grand Rapids is the home of the CRC. The international headquarters of the Christian Reformed Church is right at 28th Street and Kalamazoo Avenue in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The national microscope was thrust onto Jamestown Township in the Republican stronghold of Ottawa County following that vote. In turn, a fundraiser to keep the library doors open brought in donations from around the world, including a $50,000 donation from famed romance novelist Nora Roberts. And by the way, Nora Roberts' birthday is on Monday, October the 10th, so happy birthday to Nora Roberts. McLaughlin, who was recently named interim director of the library, is the third person to lead the library within a year's time. Her predecessors resigned amid continued harassment, with some making outlandish claims their practices are grooming children to be exploited. That is according to Larry Walton, chair of the Patmos Library Board. In neighboring Kent County, the library system overseeing 21 branches in the Grand Rapids area so far this year has seen triple the number of formal challenges to remove books from shelves compared to last year. Last fall, the Byron Township supervisor in southern Kent County publicly pondered why the township was supporting the local library branch and suggested turning it into a shoe store amid a small uproar about a graphic novel accessible to children that featured an LGBTQ hockey player drinking and swearing. Sorry, folks, these kids learn this language out on the playground. They're not reading it out of books. Got news for you. Lakeland Library Cooperative Director Carol Dawes said the co-op, which has 42 public library members across 8 West Michigan counties, this year has been seeing more people coming in very disgruntled about books on the shelves. Dawes said, quote, "This is the only time in my 37-year career here and in Illinois that I have ever seen people vote to defund a library over LGBTQ plus materials. It is alarming that out of 67,000 titles in this library and 90 LGBTQ plus titles that they decided that they should defund the library." End of quote. Nationally, the 1,651 book titles being targeted for banning through August this year already is the highest on record in the last 20 years, according to the American Library Association. According to their top 10 list of challenged books, they include Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe for LGBTQ content and sexually explicit images, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas for profanity, violence, and an alleged anti-police message and social agenda, and George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue for LGBTQ content, profanity, and sexually explicit content. Book challenges and a tax renewal put the issue front and center in West Michigan. Patmos Library is the only library in the state so far to have the anger about certain books materialize into funding cuts at the polls. Mikula said that a total of 50 library millages were on the ballots in the August 2nd primary. 45 of those millages passed, 4 failed for apparent normal reasons such as a rejection of further taxation. And that includes in, I believe, Ionia or Belding, I forget which one, where they've been wanting to replace the library for a very long time. They have a space dedicated, but they have to claim the space by the end of this year or it goes away. It's unreal. And people are dumb about the importance of libraries. I'm just going to tell you. Libraries aren't just about books. They're about internet access to people who are poor. It is. It's about providing entertainment to people who may not see these things, like DVDs. They might not hear their favorite musicians on CD that you can rent from the library. I've talked about internet access. They have computers where you can get on the internet there. You can bring your own laptop and get on the internet that way. They have fax services. You can fax documents that you need to get somewhere in a quick amount of time. Libraries are very important. Reading is very important. Really, they are. All right, and I want to get to this final story here. Let's get to Off the Cuff. This is the Associated Press out of Albany, New York, dated October 6th. A New York City man has been charged with smuggling 3 Burmese pythons in his pants at a U.S.-Canadian border crossing. Wow. 36-year-old Calvin Batista is accused of bringing the hidden snakes on a bus that crossed into northern New York on July 15, 2018. Why are we finding out about this now in 2022? Unreal. Importation of Burmese pythons is regulated by an international treaty and by federal regulations listing them as injurious to human beings. Batista of Queens was arraigned Tuesday in Albany on the federal smuggling charge and released pending trial, according to a news release from the office of U.S. Attorney Carla B. Friedman. It's taken over 4 years to prosecute him? What the hell? And he's just being arraigned now. An email seeking comment was sent to Batista's lawyer. The potential maximum sentence for him is 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000. The Burmese python, one of the world's largest snakes, is considered a vulnerable species in its native Asia and is invasive in Florida, where it threatens native animals. Well, I just have to ask, is that a Burmese python in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Me kinky.
Oh, Tano, be quiet. Wow. Unreal. I wonder if this Calvin Batista is related to actor and former WWE wrestler Dave Batista, because it's the same spelling of the last name. I don't know. Why would you want to bring these into the country? And why would you want to smuggle them into your pants? They must get some sort of money for them. A lot of it, probably. Well, folks, we're out of time for this week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.